In today's episode of Full Strength Leader, we talked with Scott Kelly, who is a former U.S. Army Special Forces officer and the host of At the Water's Edge, where he explores national security, geopolitics, and leadership through conversations with practitioners and experts. After leaving the military, Scott worked in the defense technology sector on advanced communications and networking capabilities supporting U.S. forces operating in contested environments. He is also the founder of Greyzone Advisory, where he advises organizations on geopolitical risks and the strategic implications of global competition for business. Through his podcast and commentary, Scott helps audiences understand how geopolitical events shape leadership, strategy, and decision making in an increasingly uncertain world. And you may be wondering to yourself, Scott Kelly, that sounds like a familiar name. And so he was actually the person who had their resume seen all over and go viral on TikTok at a Jonas Brothers concert. And so as soon as I got in contact with him, I was like, hey, let's talk about what this means for leadership when stuff like that happens. When things come into our careers outside of our control, how do we as leaders and as people leading ourselves manage that? And we got into lots of other conversations about how to lead well from his experience. And you are going to want to have a notebook ready to write down some of this stuff. So let's get started. You didn't get to where you are by playing small. You got here by outworking, outthinking, and outleading the room. But the higher you climb, the harder the questions get. And nobody hands you a playbook for this level. Welcome to Full Strength Leader, the podcast for executives, high performers, and leaders who refuse to coast, with surface-level leadership advice and ready to do the real work. Hi, I'm Kabrina Ashley, applied neuroscience practitioner and leadership consultant, and this is where I bring you the intersection of science and strategy and where real leadership gets built. Every episode, I bring you the research, the real talk, and the frameworks you need to lead at your absolute best, even when things feel upside down and on fire. Because half-strength leadership isn't an option. This is Full Strength Leader. Welcome back to another episode of Full Strength Leader. I'm here with Scott Kelly, who most of you will recognize his name because his resume was looked at a Jonas Brothers concert, and he went viral without trying to go viral. And that changed a lot of things in your life and has brought you to this new space. And I was really interested in talking to you and reached out to you on LinkedIn because I wanted to see kind of like what was this doing from a leadership perspective and as a professional when you have somebody like Jimmy Fallon who's like, here's this guy's LinkedIn, go and hang out with him. And I was like, oh my God, what a cool thing. So I was actually sitting in my kitchen and eating breakfast and I saw it drop and I was like, oh, this is weird. Like LinkedIn stuff never gets publicized in the real world. And so the second that he pulls up the QR code, I'm like, hold on. And off to the races. And so we had a really nice conversation. And I would love for you to introduce us to you and what you do and, kind of how you got into the situation where you accidentally went viral.
Sure. So my name's Scott Kelly, currently founder and principal at Greyzone Advisory and host of the At the Water's Edge podcast. I do a lot of work with companies who are trying to manage geopolitical risk and grow their business in the federal space, especially with the Department of Defense. Previous to that, worked in telecom, and previous to that, was in the Army for 10 years. Started off in the infantry, switched to Special Forces, a couple trips overseas. Now I'm living in upstate New York with the wife, two dogs, a cat, and two wonderful kiddos.
Yeah, that's awesome. And so you're doing the whole entire gamut of things.
It's been a heck of a ride. Nothing in my professional career I can say has ever turned out the way I planned it, but it all seems to work out in the right way. So grateful to be here.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I think when big things happen, it's one of those moments where you have to reevaluate and go, is my life going in the direction that I want it to go? Is my career going in the direction that I want it to go? Because I know personally for me, I had a cancer scare last summer, and it really makes you go into the situation, deal with it, and then go, where do I want life to look like now? And I think for you especially, this was your life being paraded on television and in front of millions of people, kind of without your permission. So life just happened to you.
Yes, I went viral on TikTok without having ever been on TikTok, and my resume was viewed by some 60 million odd people and then blasted all over national media. That was not something I was expecting to happen in 2025. I did not have that on my bingo sheet. Um, so yeah, when I first got the word that national media was interested in this story, Washington Post reached out to write an article. Like, that's cool, a little feel good write up in the Washington Post. It's nice, a newspaper column. They got a columnist that does feel good stories. It's great. Then Fallon's team reaches out and says, "Hey, you want to come on the show?" And it's like, "Oh crap, that's a whole nother thing." And then the question is, okay, if you had an opportunity like that, what would you do with it? And then my first thought was, let's just say yes now, and I'll figure out what this is for as we get closer. And get closer means I'm getting on a plane in the morning. So closer
Mhm.
is now, but let's figure that out in the next moment. So
Yeah, exactly.
yeah, so I said yes to going on Fallon, went on there. So I was medically retired out of the Army, spent 10 wonderful years there. It was the best job I ever had. But a series of injuries had caught up to me, and I got medically retired when I got back from Afghanistan in 2021, got out in 2022, and received a ton of love, care, support from the veteran community, both transitioning out of the military and then just being a veteran in the civilian world. And so decided if I'm going to get a chance to go on national TV and platform something for 5 seconds, I'm going to platform veterans transitioning out of the military. Can't say it's the most important issue in the world, but it's the most important one to me that I can speak about credibly.
Mhm.
So took that opportunity, and did end up being a big risk professionally, which is a bit unexpected. But you want to talk about leadership, you have to know who you're leading. And you
Yeah.
can't be a leader without a community. And you can only lead people that want to follow you. So how you show up in big spaces in small ways matters a lot when you're trying to represent a community well. And then they can invite you to be a leader or not. I think that's an
Mhm.
important lesson for people to understand. And there's risk
Yeah.
involved, but the risk's worth taking.
Mhm. Well, and I think I remember seeing the video because I've followed the Jonas Brothers almost religiously since I was a wee child, wishing that they would be my boyfriend, at
Hmm.
that kind of age. And I remember seeing this go viral on TikTok and going, my gosh, I hope Scott Kelly gets whatever job that he's trying to get. And that there was millions of people who were like, oh my God, Scott Kelly. Like it was almost like watching this community of people who have been laid off, who have been looking for jobs, who have been doing these things. And you were basically shoved into a position of leadership where people were following you, not because you had sought out that leadership, but because the moment in time kind of the universe conspired to plop you out of it in a Jonas Brothers concert. And it was really cool from the sidelines because I sit and watch all the comments and things like that as they're coming in when it comes to this kind of stuff. And people were just so excited for you and were sharing it all over the place because they were like, "Oh my God, if I can't get a job myself, then I can at least help Scott get out there farther than he was." And I'll let you go ahead and explain why somebody was actually looking at your resume because that's a really fun roundabout thing. But I think it's worth pointing out that there's so much leadership pieces here that will tie back into your podcast here in a second. But if you want to share that bit of the story and kind of how you got there.
Yeah. So another random coincidence. So the video comes out, and I don't know who's looking at my resume. I don't know how they got my resume. Piece that together later. So the concert was on a Sunday, and the TikTok video gets posted. By Monday, it's got 5 million views. By Tuesday, it's in print media. Wednesday, Nationals reaching out, it's at 50 million views. But Tuesday morning, I actually got a phone call from a guy named Brandon, who we later discovered was the gentleman in the video looking at my resume, asking if I was interested in helping his company expand in the Syracuse area. And of course, he calls me, and I look down. He's already on my phone. He and I were in the same infantry battalion in the Army together way back in the day. So we started talking and catching up on that. Now, I had never applied for a position with his company. I'd never heard of his company before he called me. After all this settled down, I actually went back through and tried to figure out, like, hey, how did my resume hit his inbox? And
Mm,
actually found the exact message on LinkedIn from one of the random recruiters that'll hit you up on LinkedIn with a generic job offer and asking for a generic resume. And yeah, I got a random message from a recruiter on LinkedIn asking for a resume for a job that was nondescript. I gave him my standard spam resume, and that's what they sent to Brandon, and it showed up on TikTok.
That's crazy. And
Yeah.
so LinkedIn for the win again, I guess.
Again, wasn't applying for a job, didn't know the company, just I got advice early in my career, talk to every recruiter that ever reaches out because you never know. And it gives you a lot of practice with talking to recruiters, which is a good skill to have polished off in case you ever find yourself needing it. So,
Yeah, well, and we have a lot of recruiters that are coming on to this show because I've just become friends with them over the years. And it is because there's people think of them as like such a scary group of people. It's like going and talking to the banker when you don't feel like you have enough money, or talking to the lawyer when
yeah.
you feel like you need them.
Mm-hmm.
You're like, I don't necessarily know that I want to have a conversation with you, but it is really great advice of
Oh, yeah.
talking to those people. And I like that you have a spam resume.
Well, it's just like every year you update it and it's generic. It's not like written for a particular role. It's just kind of what you've done. But you modify it for jobs that you want to apply for. But yeah, if someone hits me up on LinkedIn, it's literally just, it was in the folder next to my browser window. I just dragged it over and hit reply. And that was the extent of it until Jimmy Fallon called.
Yeah, which is
Well,
crazy.
his team
And you,
called. Jimmy didn't call me directly, just to be clear.
I mean,
He's
if
got
Jimmy
people for
Fallon
that.
called you directly, I had a client one time who knew Jimmy Fallon, and I was like, can I meet him too? They never want to give those connections out, though. But they're like, yeah, we just went to a dinner party the other day. And I'm like, that's awesome. Can I come next time? Um, but you got to have this really cool opportunity to meet Jimmy Fallon, and then you got to meet the Jonas Brothers. And then you got to talk about the podcast, which is really what I want to talk about, because all these people are good and fine, but there's enough famous people we could like throw a rock and hit them. Um, I live in
They frown
Nashville,
upon that
so
when that happens. Oh, you live in Nashville? Yeah.
yeah,
So you get a lot
yeah.
of folks down there. Yeah.
So, I run into people all the time and I'm like, you look familiar, but I couldn't tell you if you were my friend from high school or if you're somebody that I've seen on TV. So, my parasocial relationships are kind of like, if I looked in the yearbook, would I find you? And so, as good and as fine as those situations are when we get into contact with big people or people that we respect, whether that's the normal famous like TV stars or movie stars, or if it's, a leader that we very much respect. Those are good and fine, but those don't really shape all of our leadership from this big point. And so the point that for you was really the fact that you got to go on there and you got to talk about the thing that's most important to you. And then the podcast that you started in order to help that group of people. Do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. So early on in my military career, I got into writing. There's a bunch of great military blogs out there, and I would occasionally write for them. Um, I found out as a junior officer is one of the best ways to get my voice out there and express agency. And once I started doing that, I started connecting with folks that they had the same issues that I had at my point in that, or at that point in my career. They just weren't sitting where I was sitting, so I learned to start reaching out with that. Eventually, started my own blog called At the Water's Edge, and then turned that into a podcast because it's more fun to talk to people. And I
Mm-hmm.
realized that if I want to talk to all these experts and I want to call them up and like, hey, can you come on, like, tell me all your thoughts and ideas about this subject? They're going to say no. But if I tell them I'm going to record it and share it with the world, now the answer is yes.
Mm-hmm.
So easy networking, start a podcast. Um, so I started a podcast called At the Water's Edge. The name At the Water's Edge comes from an old saying in American politics that we've lost, is that politics stops at the water's edge. And my formative professional experience at that point was I was a ground force commander in Afghanistan in our final days there, watching northern Afghanistan fall apart in real time. And I'd spent all of my formative years, from high school through college as a cadet through 10 years active duty in the service, training for the global war on terror, thinking about the global war on terror, and I
Yeah.
watched the whole thing fall apart there at the end. So I wanted to start a place where we started talking to folks in the national security community about the practicalities of how we conduct ourselves overseas, how foreign policy is constructed, how national security is pursued, um, and have the types of conversations in the types of ways that I felt no one had been doing for the past 20 years. Um, Part of that is how you treat veterans when they come home matters a lot. How their families feel about their service matters a lot. you can look at what happened to our ability to recruit and maintain a professional force post-Vietnam and the drop-off there, and see pretty
Yeah.
quickly that how you take care of veterans is actually directly a national security issue. It's not just a feel-good topic. Um, so that is one of the themes that we talk about on the show. And we should actually have a really great series coming out here in a few months on post-traumatic stress disorder and some of the next generation treatments, psychedelics, and some of that stuff that's coming into market here pretty quick. Um, so yeah, that's the podcast at the Water's Edge.
Yeah, I love that. And if you have you read The Body Keeps Score?
No, but I have it on the bookshelf behind me. It's on my reading list.
Okay, so that one needs to be definitely as you're doing this series would be really informative because they do a lot of that research on veterans. And so they have this background because being a veteran is such a unique situation to be in. You see things that nobody else is going to see. You're programmed into this society basically of people that do things a certain way. And real life doesn't always reflect it as cleanly as that. So there's a lot of really great here's what we're seeing when people this is coming in from like a gene piece of the genes are changing over time. And it's very, very interesting. We could get super nerdy about that in a further episode because once you read it, you're gonna be like, ooh, let's have a conversation. And so
Absolutely.
we talk about this from, in my world, from the brain science side of I was having a conversation with somebody else, and all of a sudden I'll be like, how did that specific event make you feel? And they'll go, here's how it made me feel. And then they'll add in this extra story. And that extra story is usually something that happens before they were 25. And it's something that they're looking at the whole entire world through that lens, through those rose colored glasses or whatever color you want to put in there, of I had this experience, my parents said this, my teacher said this, and now I'm forever looking at my experiences through that. And we either push against those or we lean into them. And it's a very interesting concept. And so I'm really glad that you guys are talking about that from the veterans piece because I'm sure that a lot of people are in the same boat as you as they started out really young. And then that was what formed a lot of the ideas that they have.
Mhm. Yeah, that is one of the interesting things about the veteran experience, and something that we're exploring in the PTSD series is that when you are experiencing trauma, it's not just that you're experiencing trauma. You're doing it in this collective setting, and you're doing it at a very early phase of life. And so then when you transition out, you lose that collective setting that propped up some of your resilience, and you're also carrying that forward with you into your adult life now. When you probably experience this trauma very early on in your developmental stage, your early 20s, and that there are some unique aspects to how you approach treatment there, that we're I'm excited that I'm getting the chance to explore it and share it with everyone. And it was actually a direct result of going on Fallon and um, speaking about that issue. The amount of
That's
people that
awesome.
reached out afterwards, yeah. So Walt Piat from the Wounded Warrior Project is retired 3-star general. He's the CEO there now. His team reached out after Fallon. Talk about throwing your flag up there and seeing what happens.
Yeah.
Their team reached out and said, "Hey, our CEO wants to come on your podcast and talk to you." I was like, "Who's your CEO?" I was like, "Retired 3-star general." I'm like, "Yep, got it. Yes, of course. Please, please, please come on the show."
Hmm.
We had a great talk, and then afterwards, he mentioned some great work being done at Emory University in PTSD treatment. Because I'm actually getting my MBA at Emory right now as well. Um, and so one thing led to another, and we started looking at this whole topic. And I realized that if we're going to do this, this isn't an episode. This is going to be a series. And so just finished recording everything for part 1. We've got part 2 booked for 3 weeks from now to do that recording. Part 3, we're still working on schedules, but we're hoping to publish end of May, early June, the full 3-part series.
That's going to be amazing because there's so many people that we're just starting to talk about mental health and how that affects people in every career. But I think that when we come at it from something that is as structured as the military, it's easier to be like, okay, one, it's easier to find people that will go in and give you the information that you need. And two, you get that more structured feel of it because they're used to that structure. And I see this in the corporate side too. But I want to come back to this idea of how you threw your flag out there and people started reaching out. Because we've got the gamut of people that listen to the podcast, from brand new leaders all the way to C-suite executives. And everybody gets stuck at some level. They get to some point, like I have a lot of people that are like, I'm a vice president, but I want to be president, but I can't seem to like figure out the next step, or I'm at as high in the department as I can be unless somebody dies. And having been in that position where you're like, I like my boss, but I can't go anywhere unless they leave. Um, so I have to make this hard decision of, do I put my flag out there and see what happens, or do I just stay in my comfortable little spot? And you had the choice to do either one of those things. You could have absolutely said no
Hmm.
to doing this.
Yeah, no, I could have declined all media interviews. In fact, I was told by people where I worked that I should not be speaking to media. I was told directly by the company, do not speak to media. Because, of course, national media is reaching out. And so I had to go to my boss and let him know, like, hey, just so you know, there's viral stories out there. And it is me and it is my resume. No, I wasn't applying for a job. But, folks are reaching out to talk to me. So what should I say about the company where I was currently working? Because folks are going to ask, are you looking for a job? Where are you working? He said, we'll get back to you. It's like, okay. So later on that day, and this is Wednesday, he comes back and says, yep, guidance came down. Do not speak to the media at all. I'm like, okay. Just to clarify, so you don't want the company to be mentioned in any media stories. He's like, well, yeah, technically. I was like, okay, but I can still speak in a personal capacity. He's like, well, you probably shouldn't. It's like, huh. And then, of course, hit up my wife. I'm like, so this is going on, and this is what my company just said. And I won't say what my wife said because I had some colorful language, but she encouraged me to go on national media and just go ahead and do that. So I said, yep, okay, that's what I'm going to do. Reserve the right to speak to personal capacity, put in for PTO, which was approved, and then use personal resources to go do Fallon. Made a condition of every interview that I did with media, you can't mention my current employer at all, and please don't mention my children. Everyone agreed to that in writing. And so use personal time and resources to speak about supporting the veteran community on national television. And my company held a meeting about terminating me the following day. And a little while later, they went through with it.
Yeah. Which is so sad, because you think about this from having owned a marketing agency previous to this life, is there's so much that could have been done and so many cool things that could have come from that would have not promoted you at all. It would have promoted the company as a bigger entity.
Yeah,
And
there were a lot of folks in the company that were very upset that they didn't capitalize on it. Marketing department actually did a full write up for newsletter and promotion and all that stuff. I know this because I worked with them on it, and then they didn't publish it and asked them why. They said we were told not to. And another executive was very upset that they didn't capitalize on it because her recommendation was like, well, if Scott's going on national media, is getting publicity that we couldn't buy if we wanted to. Like, we should have the
yeah.
CEO on standby to do media hits. We should talk about the work that Scott's doing. I mean, it's a pretty good feel-good story. A medically retired disabled veteran who is in special forces is going on national media to talk about helping other veterans. And oh, by the way, he's not even looking for a job because he's very happy doing XYZ. It's an
At this
easy...
really cool company who's so supportive, and we went the opposite direction.
Instead, it's, your job's at risk if you do this, and okay, you did it, great, you're out of here. I'm like, okay.
Yeah.
But I don't know, I never regret saying no to somebody who asks you to be a smaller version of yourself.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I love this because of the fact, like, when I first talked to you, this was before all of these other things had come out. And to me, you stepping up and going, I wasn't asking for this. I wasn't looking for this, but somehow the universe brought it to me. God, universe, whatever you believe in, was like, this is your chance. This is the time. And I'm going to hand you this ticket, and you get to choose if you're going to hop on this train or not. And you got to hop on the train, meet the people, do the things, and have done a great job so far from what I've seen of capitalizing on that for what's good for you and your family and your future. Because the 5 minutes of fame is great, but it doesn't last through everything else. And so, especially with starting your own consultancy, being in that space. And for people who are looking to connect with you and everything like that, I'm assuming LinkedIn is the best place right now.
Yep, you can hit me up on LinkedIn or also email me at scott@thewatersedge.com.
So if you're listening and you have a business that could sponsor the podcast,
We
this
love
is
to
a
have
great,
sponsors.
see, this is a great
Uh-huh.
opportunity. I'm a big believer in podcast sponsors. And if you've got big CEOs that 3-star generals and doing all these different things, there's so many cool people that could be sponsoring you right now because now you get to be, have you ever seen Elise Myers?
Who?
Elise Myers.
Elise Meyer. Name sounds familiar, but I don't think so.
Okay. You're going to have to get on TikTok now that you have an account and go check her out.
All right.
But she started as a really small creator who just was like, I'm going to talk about how I think about things because my brain thinks about things differently. And then she just tells stories, and people were like, oh my God, this is me. I totally resonate with this. I've been in this situation. And I remember I started following her when she had like a couple hundred people following her. And I remember the day that her husband was recording her when she hit 1 million followers. And she almost fell on the floor because she was like, this is not, I was just getting on here to kind of like have a conversation. And if people listened, great. And if they didn't, that's all good and fine. And so I think that you'd be able to resonate with that in a way that's very unique and kind of take some of those pieces because so many times people don't apply for leadership. They're thrown into leadership. They find themselves going, I'm really good at this job. Now I've been promoted into leadership. Oh, now I'm doing this. And for you, now it's you're running your own company. So, what does that look like for you? Like, what are some of the questions that you've asked yourself or things that have gone through your head as you've transitioned into this?
Well, am I absolutely crazy for thinking I could pull off running my own company? What's the unique value that I have versus other people? Shouldn't I just go get another corporate gig and get that big W-2 and leverage what I have right now? And so one cool thing too is, you go on something like Fallon, they flash your LinkedIn profile up there, and I did 7 other national media outlets that same weekend. Um, People reach out. It's really cool. And they ask you, like, what do you want? And, okay, here's your chance to tell some folks. And there's some extremely wealthy individuals, extremely influential politicians. Like, I got to meet and talk to some really cool people. And they'll ask me, like, all right, Scott, what do you want? It's like,
Yeah.
okay. And I had to think about it. I'm like, I want to do my own geopolitical risk consultancy firm because I was frustrated by the way I'd seen other people do it. I had this unique background where I had 10 years operational experience in the Army. I was in special forces. I got to do the Afghanistan thing. I also did the Africa thing there. Transitioned out. I had a good policy background, advanced degrees in international relations. I'd been an editor for an academic journal. Um, that itself was a rare accommodation, but then I also just had 4 years in telecom tech and government contracting, closing deals worth tens of millions of dollars. And I realized that these are what frustrated me with that experience though was I rarely found a problem in the national security environment that we couldn't solve if we got the right people together. It never was that there wasn't enough money. It never was that we didn't have the tech. We just couldn't get the right people to talk to each other.
Yeah.
But that also became my secret sauce because I had sat in those 3 different communities. I could be the translator in chief and pull that together. Now, there's not a job title for that in most companies other than like sales or BD, and they just don't even understand what that means really. But I can absolutely provide that service to lots of different companies and try to build this ecosystem. And even though I got medically retired out of the Army, I'm still a national security professional. I'm just doing it in the private sector in a different way. But that's still the goal. How does this support America's long-term national security? And so solving that problem of an inefficient ecosystem is what the consultancy now, Greyzone Advisory, is all built around. And one other thing for anyone out there just thinking about starting their own business. One of the reasons I can do this and take this leap is because very good financial planning and personal advice. And the more conservative you are with your personal finances, the more aggressive you can be with your professional pursuits. Because it was interesting to get that phone call saying that, hey, you don't work here anymore, hanging up going, yeah, I don't want to apply for another corporate job. And sit down with my wife and she goes, yeah, Scott, you shouldn't. You should go do this. It's like, okay, I know people need it. I will find a way to get paid for it. I know people need it. Let's just start with that.
Yeah, I love translator in chief though. I feel like that should be on your business card.
The website for Greyzone Advisory, it will be launched soon, greyzoneadvisory.com. And something about translator in chief will likely be on there. It's one of my favorite catchphrases. I don't know
I
where I
love
got
that.
it from, but I've started using it a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe we'll put it on the
Well,
business cards.
and I love that idea because I had to do the same thing with my title because nobody understood what I did. And I was similar thing. I had a lot of different communities and people would come to me and they'd go, "You make such complex things so simple." And I was like, "How do you explain that to people? How can like, this complex thing I'm trying to explain to myself, I can't make simple because I'm too close to it."
Mm-hmm.
And so I ended up being an applied neuroscience practitioner because I was like, I do coaching, I do training, I do all these other myriad of things, but none of it fits into the box that I need it to fit into. And people would just like, "Oh, you're a marketer. Oh, you're a life coach." And I'm like, "No, but not no."
Yeah, it's like my skill set is broader than traditional categories would allow me to do it. So now I got to make
Mhm.
my own category for myself.
Yes. Well, and so many people don't understand this from I'm so glad we're going here because there's so many cool things that we can talk about. From a marketing perspective, a business perspective, and then as a leader and somebody who is in charge of leaders, understanding that your people that work for you are multidimensional and we want them to be flat. We want just the square on the page and they're a box. And so you've got this box that has all these different angles and we're like, but it's better when they're just flat and they just don't do anything. And we understand that because everybody wants this such a nice little package of people. And then when people start to learn things or they start to upskill, and we're seeing this in the market right now, is as AI comes in and as all these other pieces start to replace some of the work that we don't need to be doing, we're watching people fall off. And instead of going, okay, well, I'll just go do the thing that I wanted to do, or I'll learn something new that I've wanted to learn, they go, "Oh my God, they're taking all of our jobs." And we've kind of been saying this for generations. If it's not AI, it's a different country. It's something's always taking our jobs. And so trying to be more on like the positive side of that mindset of, yes, my job may become obsolete that I'm in right now, but where can I go from here? What other aspects of myself? Because we get so stuck on this piece of paper of the resume of what can I fit about myself on this one sheet that is my whole entire value to the marketplace. And how do I actually even present myself in a way that makes sense to people?
Yeah. And what we get through there is the difference between leadership and management. You lead people, you manage things, and a lot of people that call themselves leaders are really just managers of large organizations. And you manage a large organization by making the people into cogs, not people. People are complicated. That's why leadership is hard. So you cannot conflate leading a person, which is communicating with someone in a way where they act to support your intent when you're not in the room. You cannot conflate that with managing a large process with a lot of people in it. Those are very different things.
Yes. And I think we get people management and systems very different
Yes.
because even when we talk about it from people systems and people management versus leadership, it's still a very different topic. And it's kind of like boss and leader. They've become synonymous when they're two very different words. And it's kind of like you keep saying that word, but I don't think you know what it means from Princess Bride. And so many people are like, I'm a leader. I do these things. I'm in this place. This is my job title. But yet I don't have any of the skills to be in this job. And I think people who are high performers realize that. And that's why they go out and they find the things, they read the books. They're pulling from things like Higher Potential by Adam Grant and looking at Mike Michalowicz books and ingesting things on their own time. But there's a lot of people that are just put into those positions because they're a warm body.
Yeah. Well, that, and if you have a large complex system and you want it to run smoothly so you can exercise control, and we all inherently want to exercise control because it makes us feel safe and us feel confident, you know, and we're inherently insecure in our own position in the world. High performers are not necessarily the people that you want reporting to you, because high performers are inherently disruptive. And disruption, even if it leads to something positive, people feel the disruption more than they feel the positive impact. And so that can reflect negatively upon you. And that's very
Absolutely.
common in corporate cultures. It's actually
Hmm.
very hard to develop a culture that supports good leadership. It's extremely challenging. The default is not that.
No. Well, and I think that there's something that I talk about a lot in organizations when they bring me in is, does your organization have room for failure? Like, can I, as a high performer, go and try something big? And if it fails, I'm not going to lose my job or lose the shirt off my back at the organization, even if you let me stay, because of the fact that this failed. And Amazon has this, which I really appreciate about them, is that they have a two-way door policy. So there's two types of decisions. There's one-way doors and two-way doors. And so many people act like every decision in life is a one-way door. I went to this concert and there is no resubmission to the venue. I cannot come back in if I leave. And we treat every decision like that. When really most decisions in life, 95ish% of decisions in life are two-way doors. I can walk through that door, I can go out my front door, and I can come back in my front door as many times as I want to. And so they're allowed to spend a certain amount of money. We've seen this with like the Ritz-Carlton. They give their people a lot more ability to serve the people that they're trying to serve. And, I'm in a lot of HR threads and things like that. They're like, well, this person was gone for a certain amount of days, and we always write people up if they've gone past their 5 days that they're year that they're allowed to be out. And I'm like, are we managing kids or are we managing adults?
Yeah. If you treat people like bare minimum assets, you're going to get bare minimum effort. And if you want them, here's a hard lesson I learned as leader in the Army. This took me a while to figure out. So I'm a pretty smart guy, and I would, read all the manuals, and I'd understand complex problems. And I was like, all right, we're gonna go out and do mission A. I already know what the plan needs to be for mission A. Now I can write up that plan. I can give it to the troops. I'm the officer in charge. They're gonna do what I tell them, and we're gonna go execute that plan. The results were not great. The reason being is that I didn't have anyone else collaborate on the front end. Now, when you have folks collaborate on the front end, it's a messier process, but you get more buy-in. And maybe you don't need the buy-in for the plan, but you do need the buy-in for the execution. And planning is where you can get it. So maybe you can come up with the perfect plan, option A, but no one helped you, so you're gonna have piss poor execution. Or you could do a collaborative planning process, get people involved, let them share their ideas, let them try a few things that aren't going to work out. It's option B. Maybe option B is an 80% solution, and it was messy to get there. But now the team's bought in, and you can start executing. And a bought in team that's executing, they can adjust on the fly and get you back to option A and make it even better than what you thought it was going to be because they're bought in. But people don't get bought in when you treat them like cogs in a machine, like you treat them like flat, inanimate objects. Um, you know, HR policy is where leadership dies.
Yeah. Well, and there's so many cool things that people bring to the table that we don't even realize. And so they might have had an experience abroad or grown up a certain way or know how to use a system better than the person who created the SOP to use the system. And so I'm always encouraging people of like, hey, I'm training you how to do it this way. If you find any better ways that do it faster, more efficiently, or more cost efficient at the end of the day, fabulous, run with it. Just let me know so we can update the SOP for the next person. And I think when you give people that, they own it. They want a piece of it. And if you think about it like renting a house versus buying a house, if I rent a house, even if I'm a really good person, let's just assume that both people are really great people. I'm not going to take care of the rental house as much as I'm going to take care of my own house. Like if something's broken, I'm going to be like, well, I'll call the rental property about that. And if they decide to fix it quickly, great. If they don't, it just sits there because I'm not going to spend my own time, my money, and my resources to go fix something that I don't own. Now, on the other side, if you had the same exact thing with a house that you owned, you're going to hurry up and fix it. You're going to make sure that it's doing well. You're going to do even more above and beyond what you would do anywhere else because you own it. So I might paint the house a different color. I might do more things for the lawn. I might, put more rooms on the house. But it's because I own it. So I feel some kind of connection to it. And most people don't feel any connection to work. They're like, oh my God, it's Monday again. Why do I have to leave my warm bed in order to go do this thing? Because, and the only reason that, like, I love the question when people interview people is, why do you want this job? And I'm like, everybody's answer is because they want to eat and live indoors. Let's just be totally honest here. They don't want to be here.
That's why you have to pay them to show up.
Exactly, because if they wanted to be here, I know so many people who volunteer hundreds of hours a year
Mm-hmm.
to do stuff that you're like, you're really not getting paid for that? Like, no, I would never do that for free. And it's because they believe in it. They want to do it. And so, how do we make work like that? Like, obviously, don't stop paying your people. That's not what we're saying at all. But if people actually enjoyed doing the work that they did for you, don't you think that they'd be more innovative?
Mm-hmm.
They do things more efficiently. They would produce more. Your people would be happier. Your management would be happier. Your C-suite would be happier. And then if you have investors, they would be happier because there'd be more money there. Like we look at the
Yes.
Savannah Bananas.
Mm-hmm. Savannah Bananas? What's that?
Okay. I'm just like giving you all of the cool things to go look up after this.
I didn't even know
So
who the Jonas Brothers were, until a few months ago. So I'm way behind.
I'm just going to start sending you articles on LinkedIn of like, here's this cool new person you need to check out.
All right.
But the Savannah Bananas are a minor league baseball team in Savannah, Georgia. And so Jesse Cole bought this team before they were called anything. They had a different name. And they had just been like the failures. And they kept this team alive because they were in this really cool stadium that they wanted to keep. Well, Jesse buys it and they're basically living on the floor. Him and his wife are trying to like make ends meet. And so they put out a survey and they say, help us name the team. And they're kind of the laughingstock of Savannah at this point. And people start putting in things. And so they picked Savannah Bananas because they were like, that's fun. We could do a lot of stuff with that. And then they started doing regular baseball the old way. And they were like, this is not working. No. And so Jesse starts to put in fun things. And so now they've got a cheerleading squad of, they call them the Nana Bananas. And they're older ladies, they're grandmas, they're nanas. And they are the cheerleaders. And then they have the dance team, which is it's a bunch of dads.
Mm-hmm.
And so they have like the whole dad bod thing going on. And it's hysterical. And they do 16 to 17 new things at every single game. They're just trying stuff. They're doing new things. They're doing fun things. And it's because the people that are in it are so bought in. One of the players that I follow who is in love with Taylor Swift, he is always like, okay, no, this is my thing. I'm going to like totally go into it. He learns all the dances. He does all these things. They've got a dancing umpire and people love it. And they've sold out giant stadiums, football fields of people to come and watch baseball because of the fact that they were like, how do we make people enjoy this more? It wasn't just, how do we make more money? They are making money hand over fist. And instead of going, well, we could raise the prices on these tickets, they're like, we're going to keep it the same. And then scalpers started buying the tickets and then selling them for way above. So they were like, cool, we're going to make it the same price and we're going to make our own ticketing system to where you have to sell it back to other people at the same price if you can't show up. There is no like making money on this. And so everything that they were doing was thought through in order to make the fan experience better, which was their main driver, but also to make it more enjoyable for the people who are doing it. Like you can go and volunteer. So if they're in your town, when they come to New York, go Google them and you can volunteer in the back end for the games. And I'm dying to do it because of the fact that I'm like, I want to see the back end of this. I want to see how people are interacting with each other. Is it really as cool as people say that it is? Like, to me, this is like my Super Bowl of meeting people. And so instead of meeting a famous person and are they the same person on the screen as they are the rest of the time, I'm like, does this team function like they actually say they do? Because there's something so beautiful about that. And they have such buy-in from the people that are buying from them, which is really like, if we don't have a business that's making money, it's just a really expensive hobby.
Mm-hmm.
So they have to be making money. And they're doing it in a way that is sustainable for everybody involved.
Nice. That's really cool. I love how counterintuitive that is. People under index on how far you can get, how much of a competitive advantage it can be if you actually go out of your way to treat people well. It is, I'm in an MBA program, and they don't have a class on how do you treat people well as a competitive advantage. But if you look at almost every successful business, as they grow, things change. But if you're getting started, treating people well is the number one thing you can do. And there's all sorts of fun, creative ways to do that. And that's such a great example of giving people agency.
Mm-hmm. Well, and when it comes to people, it all depends on what's the meaning behind what we're doing. So, Slack, for example. I was blown away when I found out that Slack is they're not all work from home. I was like, but that's what you built a system to work from home. Why do you not all work from home? But their workaround was like, well, we've got a masseuse that comes in on Thursday and we've got lunch in the that we bring in. And I was like, well, that's good for those people who want to do that, but what if they don't? And does some of these benefits that we put into our corporate packages, do we need to think a little bit more broadly of if I have a mom who goes on leave, for example, can she work from home for the first 2 years? And then maybe there's options for hybrid positions. And I mean, I'm seeing this with my own partner who they were from working from home all of COVID and can do their job completely perfectly, not in office. And then all of a sudden somebody was like, I actually need to see those beautiful faces again so I can make sure that they're doing work. And I'm like, do you not know how to read data?
See, people are this infuriates me. So one thing that I don't like about corporate America is that it has forced me to give the Army more credit for what it does right.
Mm.
And it prevents me from just being the cynical veteran that I just always wanted to be when I grew up, or that I thought I was destined to become. One incredibly important leadership lesson from the Army is that, down to the lowest possible level, you have to have a commander's intent and an end state. And there's a whole mission order that comes with it, but the intent of the mission is X, and at the end state, it looks like Y. Those have to be spelled out. And everyone, you have to memorize it for whatever mission you're doing. And you're told, like, hey, we're going to go start executing this. If you forget everything else, just work on accomplishing X for Y reason. If you nothing else, just focus on that. And at least it forces people to think through what they're doing and how it aligns with the rest of the organization. Mm-hmm. Nobody does that in corporate America, and it is so infuriating. They get some generic answer like, we want to increase profitability, or increase operational efficiency, or reduce downtime, or yada yada yada. It's like they're defining activities, not outcomes. And so again, management versus leadership. Do you motivate people to work towards the desired outcome? Because if you are motivating them, you don't need to babysit them. They're going to do the work. And you can coach them along the way, which is a separate function. Coaching is different than leadership. You might have to dual hat that, but those are two different things. But no, we don't do that because it's hard, because it forces us to actually think and be transparent. Transparency is scary. So we manage activities and we call that productivity. And productivity is good, even though productivity usually doesn't actually mean anything. Mm-hmm. Production is not valuable by default.
Yes. And a lot of times people are just busy because they feel like they need to be busy. I need to look busy in order to feel like I'm being productive. And you might be accomplishing a lot of interesting things, but if I reorganize my cabinets every single day, have I been productive? Yes, because I've done something. Have I done anything worth value, though? No. The first time we could call it that, but a lot of people just get stuck in this. I see this with entrepreneurs all the time. They're like, well, I put out all these different posts on social media and I commented on all these things. And I'm like, okay, cool. Was it productive actually, though? Or was it just busy work? And so I'm always encouraging people this. So I call it the definition of done. What does done look like for this thing? And nobody knows what that is.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's weird too because large organizations are the worst at this because they're just more prone to bureaucratic processes. But organizations move at the speed of trust, and trust is based on relationships. Relationships are the number one currency. Everything else is downstream of that. And there is no way to ruin relationships faster than to disrespect people to the point where you are blatantly wasting their time doing
Yeah.
BS. Like, it is so destructive to organizations. You cannot manage your way out of that. And folks feel like that if they give people time off or they give people freedom or flexibility, it reflects poorly on them because they're not in control or in charge. So leadership doesn't mean you're in control or in charge. Leadership is something else. Leadership is having enough emotional maturity and enough, confidence to not be the expert, to let go, to let other people have buy-in. Corporate culture is rarely set up to reward that, but it could be.
Yes. It absolutely could. And I think it comes down to, are we putting our priorities in order? And defining what leadership looks like. What does managing a system? So if I'm a marketing professional, I would manage the email system. I would manage the ads system. I would manage the social media system. None of those are people, but they still need to have somebody managing them. Now, when I move to a director of something, now I'm managing the person who manages those systems. So, how do I manage them in order to give them more freedom to then manage those systems better? And most people don't think through that process. They want things to just get done. And I see this in the hiring process a lot, is people will go, do you have the skills that I think that this job needs? I don't know that they need this, but I'm going to put a lot of words into this job description so that if we ever ask you to do anything that's outside of this, we've also put in that little disclaimer that it might be things outside of this job description so that there is no scope of what you're doing. We're just putting stuff on your plate, hoping to God that this is going to be something that gets us closer to whatever the end goal is that we haven't actually defined. So we're walking into uncertainty with uncertain end goals and uncertain people, and everybody comes to work and goes, somebody's going to tell me what to do today. Instead of going, I know what the end goal is for this quarter, this year, whatever it is, and now I'm going to go do those things. So we end up in like a perpetual, nobody knows what they're doing, but everybody keeps doing it because it's still making some kind of money.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but we don't know why, and we don't know how to grow, and we don't know what's next.
Mm-hmm. But we really want to scale, because that sounds like a really good word to say when we're in the big meeting.
Yeah, we want to scale. We want to get into a hyper accelerator. Let's talk about mergers and acquisitions. And it's like, well, why? Like, what problem does this solve? What value does this create for somebody else? At some point, there actually are customers out there you need to take care of. And it's amazing how many boardrooms I've sat in where the end customer is never discussed. It's like, if we work towards increasing value for them, then we'd know what the other priority should be. Like, you can solve marketing, you can solve operational efficiency once you understand what value you're trying to provide for a customer and work backwards from there. But folks just try to grab what they currently have and make it better without aligning it to an end state that actually serves the organization. And again, that just comes down to poor leadership, not pulling in people and getting them on the same page. And here's the uncomfortable thing about leadership is that when you do define those priorities and those principles, that end state, it means sometimes you're wrong.
Yep.
Because now we're all agreeing that we're moving towards that goal. And my job as leader is to get everyone else moving towards that goal, which means my own ideas and biases might not be the correct way to get there. And I have to be willing to accept that. If you never define it, though, then Leadership is just making everyone else dance to your tune.
Mm-hmm.
And it's easy to default to that.
Yeah. Well, and I think I see this in my own parenting, to bring it a little closer to home for people who maybe aren't in that situation, is as my kids get older, sometimes they come to me and they'll say something, and I'll go, I don't know if that's the right direction for that. And then they'll go and do it anyways because they're little humans. And I'll go, you were right there. Okay. I was incorrect. Thank you for correcting me. Because so many people are so afraid to say, I was wrong. I'm so sorry. Thank you for showing me a different way. Thank you for doing something different. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to learn something new. Because in learning is a double-edged sword. When we learn things, that also means that we're probably wrong on some other things because we've learned something new. So now we can replace that with wherever we're going for that next thing. And especially as fast as corporate moves, as fast as the world is moving, as fast as AI and tech and all these pieces are coming in, we're going to be wrong. So you might as well just be like, okay, cool, I'm going to be wrong. All I have to do is say, I'm wrong, I'm sorry. An episode that we had with Danya, who is right before this podcast, she was talking about how she worked in the newsroom. And in news, if you messed up or if something got reported incorrectly, they had to go and say, here's what the actual facts were. This was said wrong or this was typed in incorrectly. And she was like, when I first started, I was always like, that was me. That was me. But she said something so insightful is that if everybody would just admit when they were wrong, it would lead to so much more freedom.
Yeah. Another thing too with that is like some situations are unknowable, so you're inevitably going to be wrong, and that's okay. You don't wait for all the information. You wait for the minimum amount of information you need to get going, and then you get going, and you fail forward fast, and you will make so much more progress if you do that. And if you just let go of this idea that you know the answer, your plans are going to be perfect, it's so freeing. And something we used to do when we were breaking down complex problems and special operations is that we list out, okay, here are the facts and here are the assumptions. Most of our plans are going to be built off assumptions, which means we know the plan's wrong before we even execute it. But as we execute it, we're going to validate our assumptions, or we're going to change our assumptions and turn them into facts, or realize like, oh, nope, this is all completely wrong. We got to go in a completely different direction. That's okay. No one's ego is tied up in the plan because we know the plan's built off a large series of assumptions. And we also know there's a point where it cost us so much to wait to start executing. You just need to start doing it. What's the bare minimum you need to know to get started? Great. Now get started and let the process teach you.
Mm-hmm. The smallest viable product. And we ask questions as we get along. There's a great book. It's a children's book that I suggest to all of my clients when they start working with me. And it's called Failbration. And it's all about celebrating when you're wrong, when you fail at something, and taking the lesson from that and going, okay, what did I learn from this thing that happened? Relationship, leadership, thing that didn't go like I wanted it to at work. And how do I use those lessons for the next time around? And then the real, for lack of a better word, mindfuck on that is that sometimes you'll do something and it will work and you were right. And then in a year from now, you'll do the same thing and it will stop working and you have to relearn. And so the thing that you've succeeded at, you will then fail at.
Mm-hmm.
And then you get to reorganize all of those things and do it again. And that's the exciting part of life and leading. And I think a lot of what you've learned in this whole last couple of months, because when we think about it, this hasn't been that long of a span.
Now we're coming up on maybe 5 months now, almost 6.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So this is all still like a real fun new ride. You're learning things every day, and you've mentioned a lot of really great things for leaders and people looking to get into leadership to think through.
Yeah. And one thing that surprised me, because I'm pretty good at planning and pretty good at breaking down complex problems, everything I'm doing right now is very doable, but almost all of it's new. And the interesting part too is, actually helping clients, that's the easy part of all this. When I have a client, I'm helping them through a problem like that. That's hot knife through butter. Love it. It's so smooth. It's everything else that's complicated and that's friction, but it's all the other stuff that's necessary. And I've thought about, bringing on people to help me with it. But again, I don't know what I'm asking them to do until I've at
Yeah.
least walked through and struggled with it myself. Um, so it's sometimes it's both encouraging and frustrating. What's encouraging is I developed this business plan for growing this consulting firm, and so far the plan's actually working. The frustrating part is everything takes longer than I think it's going to take because I just don't. I know what I need to do, but I don't know what I don't know about it until I get into it. Into
Mm-hmm.
something I feel like, oh, all right, Tuesday afternoon I'm going to knock this out. Well, that Tuesday afternoon project took 3.5 weeks to get through, but it had to be done. So it's progress. But that's 3.5 weeks of frustration to check off one thing on the list.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, but I'm leading myself right now, and part of being a leader is motivating your people. And so showing myself enough grace to go, yeah, Scott, it took you 3.5 weeks to figure that out, but now you know what it is, and that is serious progress, and it does provide value to the client. So thank God you took 3.5 weeks to do that.
Mm-hmm. Well, and as somebody who's been doing this for almost 13 years in business, it does get easier, but there's always those seasons. Like, my partner asks me every day when he gets home from work, he goes, "How was your day? Did you get all your stuff done?" And I'm like, I got X, Y, and Z done, but that A, B, and C that I thought that I was going to get done that moved over from the day before, that I was so sure that was going to be the things today, I got into it and it was like Hail Hydra, it had another head. And all of a
Mm-hmm.
sudden I was having to knock that one out and before I could finish the task. And it's something that we take for granted because there is a lot of systems and processes when we're in a corporate situation that have already been mostly figured out for us in a lot of ways. And so when we have to go and build something from the ground up, we go, "Oh, I know how to build a house. I built with blocks before." And then you forget that there's plumbing and electricity and all these extra things that you have to learn along the way that we're like, it looked so pretty on the outside.
Mm-hmm. Well, and all that stuff too. Like, it's interesting when you look at back at something that you accomplished. Like, all right, finally built the website, got the email set up, I got the LLC formed, I've got my doing business as paper filed. Like, oh, all this is actually really really simple to do once you've done it once, but you got to do it the first time.
Oh, yeah. See, I have 3 podcasts. This podcast has been the easiest one to start because I had already screwed up and made all the mistakes the first 2 times. And then I was like, "Ooh, okay. I think I got it now." I mean, I said the same thing like after I had my first kid. And then you have your second kid and you're like, "Okay, I think I've got it now." And there's always little bits and pieces that are slightly different that you're like, there was no rule book for this one." But as you get more, it's almost like it's a muscle. As you get more practice doing things that you don't understand, you get better at doing the things that you don't understand faster.
I would definitely second that. That is absolutely true. There's value in getting started poorly. So much
Hmm.
value. And you mentioned podcasting. So I do the podcast at the Water's Edge. That naturally became a credibility builder and a lead generator for Greyzone Advisory. It happened organically. And thank God I had, 30 some odd episodes done and completed. That also meant I had 30 some odd episodes of me interviewing experts in their field, very dense content, foreign politicians, people in charge of the Congressional Budget Office, retired generals, all sorts of incredible folks, which made dealing with clients and coaching them so much easier. But I had to have that body of work behind me. And then lo and behold, Jimmy Fallon happened with the Jonas Brothers.
You started the podcast and you got through um, getting people on the podcast, being prepared, doing the things that you needed to do in order to take advantage of this situation and be able to go, "Okay, I didn't know that this was going to happen to me, but I have some things in place that I just had there." I mean, serendipitously, really, in a lot of ways, of these were just things that I wanted to do.
Yeah, no, it worked out in a weird way, and thank God that I got started doing that stuff when nobody cared and nobody was watching, so that when I was put on national media and my LinkedIn profile is shot up there, and I get to say the name of my podcast in front of 1.7 million live viewers, um, there was something there for people to go to, and something there for people to investigate, um, and an opportunity to grow that into my own thing now. And one of the first things I
Yeah.
told myself when I went fully independent was like, okay, number one goal is publish weekly content for the podcast and treat it like it's a professional platform and start marketing it that way. Um, and then everything else has been filled in around that. But so grateful that I started doing what I was doing when I did, so that when the serendipitous opportunity showed up, we were ready to go.
Mhm. We're watering the soil in order for us to plant the seeds that we want to plant.
Yep. Even though we don't know what the garden's going to look like, there's no reason not to go out there and start tilling it.
I love that. And so I know we've gone way over and talked about a lot of different things, and Scott's given us a lot of really great things to think through. But I would love to know, what did you want to be when you grew up? Like, if you think about back when you were a little kid running around in the little footy pajamas,
Mm-hmm.
what was the thing that you were like, Mom, I want to be?
The first thing I can remember wanting to be would have been a paleontologist.
Very cool.
Yeah, mostly because I thought it was so cool I could say the word paleontologist.
Mm.
That
I
was
mean, it is a fun
that was a
thing.
very advanced word for like a 5-year-old. So that made me
Mhm.
feel special.
Okay, so did you know all of the terms and all that, or was it just like I could say
I could
paleontologist?
say paleontologist, and I remember there was this one particular dinosaur book that they had at the United Methodist Church where my mom would drop me off for preschool. And I'd run in every day and I always find that exact book. And I can still remember flipping through all the pages, and it talked about dinosaurs and like all the way up to modern times. It was describing like how bison are the modern day triceratops. And on the last page, there was this train going through the Midwest and a bunch of people on the train with guns shooting all the bison. And that was like, the ecological horror story told at the end of the children's dinosaur book. But I still
Yeah, the
remember
80s
that
and 90s were weird.
they go back and watch some of the old cartoons. I'm like, whoa. I remember watching Ren and
Mhm.
Stimpy, and my parents would like hate it when we watched Ren and Stimpy. And then, I think I was in college and it came back out and I watched it. I'm like, oh dear God, yeah, that was just terrible. Like, I wouldn't let my kids watch this. This is awful. What
Mhm.
was I thinking?
Yeah, Hunchback came on, and my kids are like, "We haven't seen this Disney movie," and I was like, "Not yet. Few more years." But I love that. So okay, now I have a new goal to find a paleontologist to be on the podcast, and I'd be like, Scott, let's have a conversation with the paleontologist.
Please, I have so many questions. I have so many
Oh my
questions.
gosh. Okay, yes, this is gonna happen. I'm gonna go find one on LinkedIn, and we're gonna go make some more LinkedIn magic and get you a paleontologist friend.
Childhood dreams can come true.
I'm literally writing myself a note because vision boarding.
I have to go. I'm gonna have to go try to find that book from preschool.
Oh my gosh, yes, that would be amazing. Be like this when you're training somebody, you'd be like, this is what I was talking about. I love that. Well, thank you so much for being on the podcast and taking time out of your schedule and starting all these stuff and all the crazy that has happened in the last 6 months for you, for us to chat, not just on here, but also just face to face and connecting. And for anybody who is looking to find you, they can find you on LinkedIn at Scott
Yep.
Kelly, and then
Yep.
say the name of the website one more time.
Greyzoneadvisory.com.
Okay, awesome. And then we will put all this information into the show notes. And
Beautiful.
then again, if you're looking to sponsor and you look for veterans and that's a demographic for you, Scott's a great person to reach out to.
If you want to sponsor the nerdiest national security podcast of all time, please, I would love to have you on At the Water's Edge. It's a great show.
Mm-hmm. And we will see you next time on Full Strength Leader.
Thank you for having me.
That's a wrap on today's episode of Full Strength Leader. Take the lesson from today into your leadership this week and see what magic happens. If this episode hit home, I want to hear from you. Drop your questions, your reaction, or your biggest takeaway on Spotify in the comments under this episode. I read every single one, and your questions shape what we talk about next. And if you thought of someone during this show, do me a favor and share this episode with them, and don't forget to follow along so you never miss an episode. You can find me to connect and work with me directly at KabrinaAshley.com. Full Strength Leader starts here. We'll see you next week.